Hello, my name is Jeremy, this is Red Means Recording, and this is the Teenage Engineering OP-1. This is the first in a series of videos that I wanted to do where I actually go through the OP-1 piece by piece and talk about how it works, what it can do, what it can't do, the pros, the cons, etc. This has been something that people have been asking out for a really long time, so I guess I'm just going to try to do it. This will largely be geared towards people that are either just starting out with the OP-1 or are thinking about getting one, because I think there's a lot of misinformation about what this can do, and also it's a little inscrutable when you first get it. So if you're a power user, you're probably not going to learn a lot from this. Sorry. So this first video will largely be an overview video going over the basics of the OP-1, what it can do, etc., etc. And then we'll dive deeper into things like the synth engines, the sampling engines, the drum engine, the tape, the effects, all that kind of stuff in subsequent videos. So without further ado, let's get started. What is the OP-1? Well, the OP-1 is a digital audio workstation that was released by a company called Teenage Engineering in 2011. I got my OP-1 in 2012, and aside from changing out the logic board or the little accessory board on the side here, it's been a faithful companion to me ever since. So obviously we have a keyboard, we have 4 main knobs, we have the main volume knob, we have an internal speaker if that's how you want to work. Sometimes it's nice. This is the charging and volume thing. This is a microphone which we can sample into. And if we turn it over, there's not much going on here. This is something that you'll remove if you want to get at the board in here, which houses, let's see, we have a power switch, we have a USB in, we have a microphone in or record in, and we have a line out, which is what I use to record or put my headphones into. So with that said, let's turn this on. Okay, so we've talked about physically what the OP-1 is, and let's talk about what it is in terms of software. I already said it's a digital audio workstation, so that means a DAW. It just happens to be a hardware DAW. What makes it a DAW? Well, it has internal synth engines, it has internal drum stuff, it has internal sequencers, and it has a 4-track digital tape recorder, which is what you record your stuff onto. So first, I'm going to go over and hit Shift and the little tape button here and erase my 4 tape tracks, because those are what I had my previous OP-1 video recorded onto, and I want to make sure that they're clear for this process. So the tape is clear now. Let's talk about what is going on here. If you hit this little button right here, this is going to get you to the synth engines. The synth engines are numerous. If you hit Shift 1, you'll be able to load a synth engine preset into one of these 8 slots here. So each one can have its own preset loaded into it. You can also save presets as snapshots by holding down the individual button, and it will save it to a snapshots folder, which you can pull from by going into the snapshots folder. So there are a few synth engines that are baked into the OP-1 and a set of presets that are baked into the OP-1 for each one. Cluster, digital, DNA, Dr. Wave, desynth, FM, phase, pulse, sampler, and string. And each one has its own qualities, and they are controlled by these 4 knobs right here. So every single synth engine basically has 4 controls for the synth. For instance, this string synth here has 4 controls. Same thing with the effects. These buttons right here will take you through the different parameters for the synth engines. So you have the synth itself on 1, you have an envelope on 2, classic ADSR. On 3, you have effects. You can turn it on and off by hitting the button, or if you hit Shift and the button, you will get into all the effects, and we'll go into those later. 4 is going to be your LFOs, and again, on or off, and there are a number of different modulation options. So every synth engine has the synth engine itself, one effect, ADSR, and modulation, like an envelope. If you hit Shift 1, as opposed to Shift and one of the preset slots, you will get into a menu that lets you pick directly from the engine itself. Shift and the envelope will give you polyphonic, mono, legato, and unison, and a portamento amount. Hitting Shift 3 will give you the effects that you can choose from, and hitting Shift 4 will give you the LFOs that you can choose from. So you have 8 slots that will hold a synthesizer or synth sampler preset. The sampler is not anything to write home about, but you do have control over start and end points. You can change the loop point, and if you hit shift, you can transpose and change between reverse and forward. You can load up your 8 synth presets here. You can pull from snapshots if you want, and so this will sort of be what you're working with when you're writing a track on the OP-1. There's also a drum engine, which you get to by clicking this little friend right here. And you have the same thing where you can have 8 kits loaded up. You can hear that I have melodic content as well as drum content. And the way that drum kits look on the as a file that you're going to bring over are basically, it's just a bunch of drum hits right next to each other. Like if I took this endpoint here and I scroll it all the way over there, that's a drum kit. Okay, that's enough. That's a drum kit, but it's been sliced up, so each one of these hits is one of those slices. You have a couple different modes for how the sample plays back, which we'll get into when we talk about the drum engine specifically. You've already seen that I can move the start and end points, I can transpose, and I can reverse each slice and change the volume for each slice individually. The drum engine also has a weird envelope, which I've never really liked or understood. We may not be going into that all that much. Hitting Shift 1 in drum mode allows you to choose between the sampler drums or their drum synth, which is D-Box. We'll go ahead and pull that up in a second. You also have an effect. So right now you have their reverb on there. And then you have the same LFOs, which you can assign to different things, and we'll talk about those later. This is D-Box. It is a percussion synthesizer that's very odd, but it has its own presets as well. Okay, so things are recorded to tape. If you hit the tape button here, you get to the 4-track recorder. At that point, you have the 4 tape tracks. Selecting 1 through 4 will allow you to choose each tape track that you're going to record to. You have the volume right here of record. So this is the volume that you are committing it to the tape. So this is where you sort of do your gain staging before you record something. There is a metronome. Hitting the metronome button will give you a metronome. You have a tempo. And because this is sort of presented as a tape, you have the ability to change the inches per second, and you can link or unlink those. You also can sync with pocket operators and other things. So that's cool. I'm going to go back to 1-to-1. There are sequencers built into the OP-1. If you hit this button right here, you'll turn on and off the current sequencer. If you hit shift in this button, you'll be able to pick from the different sequencers. So arpeggiator, you can see that I have the ARP options here. Let's go ahead and go an octave up by pressing this button right here. There's an arpeggiator. There is endless, which is by holding down shift, you write to it, and oops. You can add a rest. You can make it any length that you want, and then it will play back by playing the C here. It will play back what you've played, and you can transpose it. You can change the rate. You can change the directions to random, forward, and reverse, and you can change the amount of swing. Finger is something that I generally use for drums, so let's go into the finger sequencer here on drums. What you do here is holding shift will allow you to edit the sequence. Each one of these is a step. Let's go back to the beginning. I can change the number of steps that this pattern will have by using the white knob here, and you can have uneven amounts, which is really cool. And then you have a couple different modes for how this will play back with other sequences using this particular sequencer. So I'll just show that off real quick. I'm going to erase all of this by holding down shift and using the blue key. You can see that little erase thing showed up there. Swing. Now, in replace mode if you select a different sequence while one is playing. After that sequence is done playing, it will play the next sequence that you've selected. And so on and so forth. You can also change things like join. Now those two sequences are playing together. And fill, which will go back and forth between them. It's actually really, really useful for jamming. You can set up a bunch of different sequences on the device and go to town playing one single pattern, especially when you have like melodic content that you can put on your kits. Pattern sequencer is sort of like almost like a piano roll editor here. Next up is Sketch. Sketch is a little strange. I can't say that I've ever used Sketch, to be honest. Congratulations, Sketch. You're fucking insane. Tombola is one of my favorites for ambient stuff. So let's go ahead and pick an ambient sample. Drop your notes into that rotating thing there. You can change the gravity, so whether or not they just float around or they try to sink to the bottom. And you can change the speed of the rotation. And get some very interesting sort of things going on. That's a brief introduction to the sequencers. We'll get back into them more. I don't want this video to be too long. So we've talked about the synth engine. We've talked about the drum thing. We've talked about the tape. There are lots of little tricks with the tape that we can go into in a bit. Let's talk about this real quick. You can set in and out points for a recording. You can loop those or not, which is very useful. And then let's go ahead and record a beat real quick. That's enough. Loop that. So then there are some effects over here. Like a tape stop, a reverse, a rock, and then these multi-effects, which you can actually assign. So the master tape here can have its own effects as well. Go into this real quick. You can mute each tape track. You can set the EQ. You can set a master effect, and you can set the OP-1's master drive, which is a very cool sort of like saturator compressor limiter, which I really, really like. In real time, you can mute and solo individual tracks. And yeah, one of the cool things is if I was to go over to here and record a different thing, let's see. So let's just pretend that that was something that was worth recording. And I have a 2-bar loop set up right here. So that's playing. If I hit shift and over, it's going to wait for that loop to finish and then go to the next section. So I can swap between different sections of the tape, and I can go all the way down here if I want to. So you can jump between different sections of the tape to create different sections of your performance, which I did a lot with hardware performance stuff, where the OP-1 was sort of like the main sampler kind of thing. Synth engine, drum, tape, effects for this tape, sequencers. That is the overview of the OP-1. Yeah, I hope this has been informative and not too basic for most of you. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.